seems like we have folks from coast to coast, which is absolutely wonderful. I am Rabbi Michael Birnholz from Temple Beth Shalom in Vero Beach. And I am one of the originators of this really pretty incredible collaboration that we have, this URJ Rabbi Small Congregation team up that we have. We have been running this through the course of the pandemic, and it really started with the Tikkun Leil Shavuot that happened in 2020 and has just continued to grow. We have had Purim together. We have observed Tisha B'Av together. We have had multiple study sessions through the counting of the Omer. We have had lots of different programs. We have just finished in the lead up to the High Holy Days. We just had the wonderful, incredible opportunity to have meditations through the weeks of the month of Elul, preparing us for the High Holy Days. And here we find ourselves in this observance, this celebration of Sukkot. And one of the things that you're supposed to do on Sukkot is read the book of Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes. And so as we were finishing Tisha B'Av, there was a discussion that got started among rabbis of small congregations that had been part of this collaboration. Was there a way to bring Ecclesiastes to our community, to bring for this community of learners? And so this is what we are doing. Over the next 6 days, you will have a chance to log on, and most of these are at noon. I will drop the schedule as a link into the chat in just a couple of minutes.
Do you know there's over twice as many Starbucks as there are Dunkin' Donuts?
No, I did not
If you
know
are,
that.
folks, if you are unmuted, just please mute. So if you're going to talk, so we don't get in.
Rabbi Birnholz, just if you can unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted. Thanks.
Great.
What is going to happen is each day for about an hour, a different pair of rabbis is going to talk about a different pair of chapters of Ecclesiastes. There are 12 chapters of Ecclesiastes today. Rabbi Gidon Isaacs and I will be discussing chapters 1 and 2. And so each day tomorrow will be chapters 3 and 4, 5 and 6. And so by Friday, you'll have a chance to have gone through each of the 12 chapters of Ecclesiastes and see and hear the different styles of different rabbis as they are approaching these texts. Each of the sessions is either at noon, there's one session at 1 and one session at 2 Eastern time. There are some of our rabbis that are on the West Coast and some of you are on the West Coast. And so we wanted to give you that variation. And then starting later, either today or tomorrow, a recording of our sessions will go up on a YouTube playlist that we will then send out to everybody who has registered for this program. So if you miss one session, don't worry, you will have an opportunity to hear it. It is wonderful that we are able to be together. And as I said, this is really an incredible collaboration. This is a collaboration between rabbis of small congregations and the Union for Reform Judaism. The Union for Reform Judaism is giving us tremendous support to be able to offer these programs and to be able to allow you all to register and see what these programs are. As I am here, I am going to take the opportunity. I don't think I can. I might be able to. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I am going to share with you all a screen of presentation. You will see on that screen, I hope, I'm hoping this isn't in your way, that you might be seeing the blessing for study. And so I offer this blessing for our study together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, for commanding us to, and making us holy through mitzvot, but commanding us to engage in words of Torah. And there's also the blessing of to likra et ha-megillah, that this is one of the Megillot that we study through the course of the year. And so as we study, I am now going to turn it over to Rabbi Isaacs, and he's going to start us off with the opportunity to start with the beginning of chapter one of Ecclesiastes, and I'm also going to post into the chat the link so you will have the whole calendar for our program.
Great, thank you. And I'm just looking for sorry, I guess there's a new Zoom setup. Usually I wanted to post to send you all a link to PDF, but I'll be screen sharing it anyway. Just so
Rabbi Isaacs is under chat.
I was looking under chat. I just don't see. There used to be a little, the paper clip.
Oh.
And I don't see it anymore.
If you drop you don't have the links on your computer.
Yeah. Anyway, we don't have to waste more time with that. So I will do. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'll be doing some more. I'll screen share the PDF anyway, but I'll also take the opportunity as the first to say a few words of kind of introduction on this work. And some of you may have caught, I taught on this with a colleague on this book during our Omer teaching, another one of our small congregations. So some of this is the introduction may be a bit familiar, but we also talked about different formats and as each rabbi teaches, and I know Rabbi Birnholz is picking 3 verses to focus in on. I don't know what, other rabbis will do different things. The wonderful thing about our tradition is that there are 70 faces to the Torah, so and 2 Jews, 3 opinions. So with all that multiplicity, there'll be different approaches, but I'm going to, there's a few verses. I tried to stick to 3, but in the spirit of abundance of chapter 1, which says that the eye never can never see enough, the ear can never be full. It was hard to pick just 3, so we'll look at those, and let me jump right into saying a few things about this work, often called Ecclesiastes, but you'll see we chose Kohelet, or we chose both. We're not quite sure what Kohelet means. If it's a name, a title, it does seem to connect to the Hebrew root word meaning to gather, and so Ecclesiastes in Greek has to do with a gathering of an assembly or a congregation. So we end up with this rather awkward English word that's probably even harder to say than the original Kohelet would have been. So why not stick to that title that for this work? So that's we begin this work, Kohelet, and it's such an unusual work in the Bible. I remember first encountering it kind of in my college years, maybe, or teen years, and finding it to really echo that kind of existential angst that comes with that time of year. It can feel very, very despairing. You can imagine the writer of Kohelet in that lens, kind of walking around wearing all black and watching European art house films or something like that. But what I want to say is that that's not how I see this work at all, and I want to suggest something I always those from my congregation will be familiar with. He's saying that so much any literature really has to do with intonation, how you read, and what gets in the way with what I'll say a more open reading of biblical texts, and actually often makes them easy sort of to parody even, is that we tend to approach them with this level of piety. as if everything is read in the most serious tone, and not just most serious. We also tend to approach it with a kind of that's tone, and also theology. We tend to approach it in a kind of fundamentalist way, treating it as if we moderns are the first people to really contemplate that that maybe there isn't an old man with a beard in the sky who is judging us and rewarding and punishing, but that all previous generations, especially in the ancient world, saw things that way. And so I want to say that give ourselves not just the license, but the encouragement to read Kohelet as written by someone we might know, someone who we're friends with, struggling with, or even struggle might sound a little too angsty. I mean, there's certainly anxiety in here, but we're making sense, striving or struggling in the best sense of the word to make sense of the world around. And I'll say him, because generally that the authors probably would have been male, but not necessarily. And in fact, Kohelet, as I'm saying this, I'll say is a Hebrew word, but that would register as feminine. It has a feminine ending, so even that has maybe some internal tension. So what I want to say about the tone is we tend to approach it as and here maybe I'll jump into it's a good opportunity to jump into the first verse that we'll look at. Here, let me open. Sorry, one moment. Okay, I'm going to share screen. Sorry, one moment here. I just need to. Okay. There we go. Okay, so our famous second verse, which I think really kind of drives this sense of despair, right? So when I talk about tone, it's very easy to read. Like I said, I gave the picture of an angsty teen, right? To read Kohelet in this despairing, angst-ridden way. Utter futility, said Kohelet. Utter futility, all is futile. Or the King James Version, right? Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. The truth is that the word hevel really is a word, and as often happens with Hebrew words, has a multiplicity of meanings, but breath is one of them, or vapor, right? So we read it here, Robert Walter's translation right below. Merest breath, said Kohelet. Merest breath, all is mere breath. So you imagine, here we're understanding this, what's often translated as hevel, as something that's elusive, right? That it's not that it doesn't exist. It's there, but it's not something we can hold in our hands. So just the recognition that things are as we go on, things are transient. Everything kind of appears. If you imagine a mist or a fog, it sort of appears. It can feel thicker or more present or more real, and then it'll dissipate and be gone. But that doesn't mean it didn't exist, or that our experience of it wasn't real, or that we can't hold on to things temporarily or experience them. That doesn't negate what we saw or felt. It just means that it won't stick around forever. at least this is the human level of things. But it's an acknowledgement of what is real, of what is. And so I want to, I'll come back to the verses because I want to shift gears a bit on kind of the lens we're using to look at these verses. But I just want to note that what follows are talking about the cycles of the world, right? The way we'll see the sun rises and sets and things like that. And so what I want to quote or sort of paraphrase someone I learned with many years ago, an academic, Menachem Fish in Israel, who talks about what we're looking at here is the difference between what we can know and what is. Right, to be use my old philosophy schooling.
I think we have lost Rabbi Isaacs, unless you all have frozen in my computer.
Can you?
I can.
That's better. That's better.
It's frozen.
Okay. And this, oops. Okay, so we lost Rabbi Isaacs for a moment, and he'll be back. The adventures of Zooming. So until he pops back, I will happily to step in. So as he's talking about the beginning of Ecclesiastes, it's a great kind of question for us as we're in this season, because remember that we're in the season of Sukkot. So we're in this time, and what are we supposed to be living in? We're supposed to be living in a sukkah, in a temporary, fragile booth that has holes in the ceiling and holes in the walls so that the elements can come in. And the other thing that's really important at this season as we're talking about Ecclesiastes, is you're talking about mortality, as you're talking about fragility, is that you're also at this time in the land of Israel where the dry season is ending. We've just brought in the produce of the field. So we brought in all the fruits from the trees, and we're getting ready to do the planting of grain. And when that happens, what do we need? We need rain. And so you're at this turning point of agricultural time in Israel, where if it doesn't start to rain, then you really face your mortality. You really face your fragility. That if you don't get the right amount of rain in the right time in the right season, then you're going to have a real challenge to your ability to survive. And so as we're talking about these cycles in Ecclesiastes, it's always one of those things that's really important. And I'm pretty sure that Rabbi Isaacs mentioned King Solomon, that this is attributed to King Solomon. Here he is as the king of Jerusalem, and he's wondering, what is the meaning of, quite literally, what is the meaning of life? So here you are living in a booth. You're dealing with all of the elements and the bugs. You're eating the produce of the field and enjoying hopefully enjoying a bounty. And you're thinking about, I'm about to start planting my grain. What's going to happen to me in the next season? We've just come from the high holidays where we have faced, right, what is the future of our lives? What is our destiny in this year? How are we going to be sealed in for blessing in this new year? And now we're reading this, talking about what is the meaning of life, what is the measure of life, is what King Solomon has done with his life, is that worthwhile? It looks like Rabbi Isaacs is back.
Yes.
And so I will certainly turn it back over to you. I was just explaining about rain in this season and the excitement of living in a sukkah in the season. And I'm gonna make you the spot. I'll replace you. Well, you get the spotlight all to yourself. Okay.
Apologies. I'm just jumping back in. So I want to, what follows are these, I was saying that we have in the breath, in the vapor, we have a sense of, we experience what we experience in the moment and then it disappears. We can't hold on to it. That just is, that's human knowledge, human experience. But again, the first note that I'll say leads us towards not despairing is that doesn't mean there is no permanence. There are these powerful natural forces that have these cycles that come and go, but that are always around. And of course, there's also the eternal. There's God behind it all. So it's the recognition that we could find that despairing, the fact that we can't hold on to anything if it means nothing exists, nothing's real, nothing's long term, but we exist on the backdrop of these greater cycles that are unfolding. I want to shift gears for a moment to just talk about biblical poetry and talk about the literature of this text. And maybe we'll come back to those ideas. I want to show two things. It's really meaningful and important for me to share a little bit about biblical poetry because I'm someone who, until studying it really more in depth in life, would read biblical poetry and just find it kind of repetitive and hard to, not being someone who can appreciate poetry, but I'm not someone who sits and reads that all the time. But I want to try and open it up a little more. One is that right, poetry always has an oral, right, an audio component. So while we're often in English used to hearing, or at the basic level, hearing rhyme, the Hebrew works much more on sound, on consonants and vowels. And to give you a sense of this, I want to read verse 2 once again. Havel havalim amar Kohelet. Havel havalim hakol havel. So if you can hear the repetitions of that H sound, and in particular, even the ha sound, you can, right, if we're saying breath is what we are, is what Havel is, or one way to interpret it is certainly a verse that sounds like what it is. We are panting, we're trying to catch our breaths. The sounds of that verse really mirror or echo the meaning in this really beautiful, artful way. And so you'll find that sometimes that the sounds, if you read the Hebrew out loud, you do get that element of it. And the other piece, again, I always like to preface when I say some pieces you really kind of need the Hebrew to access, not to, again, to have you despair, those who don't have familiarity, but just to recognize that there. We are still reading translation, and if you can work on either finding translations that anyway, I won't belabor the point. But one of the other strong artistic forces of biblical poetry is through meaning, the play of meaning, usually doubles, pairs. Sometimes they go beyond, but a perfect example of this is in verse 4, where I'm just reading a standard translation first, right? One generation goes, another comes, but the earth remains the same forever, right? Most of the translations are somewhere along those lines. I wrote a slightly more awkward but literal translation to give you a sense of how the Hebrew operates. And the parallels usually are parallel verbs or nouns that have either very overlapping meanings or very divergent meanings. So here, the verb is what is parallel. A generation walks out, and a generation comes, and the land forever stands. So the Hebrew verbs are holech and omedet, and so you have the contrast. Generations, that's us, right? We're walking, we're moving, we're like vapor, right? We can't stay in one place. We're constantly coming and going. But the land, the earth that we stand on, the natural forces around us, stays in place. That is solid, and it is there, right? So both to give you the sense of meaning, but also just to appreciate. And whenever you see Hebrew poetry, I guess just have faith that there's this same kind of elegance going on in the artistry of in the play of meaning. I'll say even further, just having noted it, it does go to deeper levels, not always meaning, but just I will say that the generations have are coded as masculine, right? There are Hebrew verbs, nouns are male or female. So the generation is male. The walking is a male verb. The land is female. So there's even more contrast there, right? Like if it's not enough, the verb, know that, the genders also are different. So I want to, as I'm reaching the end of my time, I know I can take a couple extra minutes. I trust that having gotten kicked off somehow, I said it's not all despairing, and I want to end with verse 15 here. A twisted thing, sorry for this, I didn't know this in this translation. A twisted thing cannot be made straight. A lack cannot be made good, or some read this as cannot be filled in, right? So again, you say, Gidon, Rabbi, as a tweet, that sounds pretty despairing. Like, what do you mean? Nothing can be changed, right? That's what we're saying. So I want to say two things. One, this does come in the context of talking about earthly natural forces on the whole. And so what this is talking about, first of all, we could read this in a really negative way as, bottom line is you can't teach an old new dog new tricks, or just, said even more simpler, people cannot change, right? We're essentially who we are. But first of all, if we see this as being about the world, right, this isn't necessarily making a claim about people, about human beings. And what I'll also say is I love to look at this as people are often familiar with the serenity prayer, right? Being able to change, right? Being able the strength to change, which I need to change, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? I'm blanking for the moment on the second part. I was trying to right, the ability to accept those that I cannot change, those things I cannot change, right? So I love to talk about the difference between acceptance and resignation, right? The serenity prayer is not preaching resignation. And I would say this line, similarly, is saying, look, don't, things are the way they are, right? Don't rage at the wind for blowing the way it is. That's just what it is. But accepting that a twisted thing cannot be made straight, you cannot fill in something that is lacking. So accept that, and now work to figure out what you can change, what you can do in this world. And I think that's part of the overriding message here of Kohelet is saying, yes, there are, you're not going to have, you can look at everything that Kohelet says and have dark moments for sure. And I think even Kohelet, I know Kohelet describes Kohelet's own dark moments. Those same things that are dark can provide consolation. The fact that as humans, we cannot have certainty or an enduring experience doesn't mean that enduring experience doesn't exist. And, as not to steal anyone's thunder with chapter 3, as we know, it also means that things will cycle, and that temporary can also be a positive in that way as well. So I'll stop there. I'll leave it there and hand it over to Rabbi Birnholz. And I'll stop this screen share. And do you need host? No, you're still a host. You're good.
I'm still hosting. Okay, so and I just dropped into the chat. I just dropped a Google link to a PDF, I think, that has some verses on it from chapter 2. So here we have been now hearing about chapter 1. Now you're going to have a chance to hear for chapter 2. And I see what's going on. And I also, if you have a question or a comment, you are more than welcome to post it into the chat or use the raise hand function. That lets me see that somebody has their hand raised. That is incredibly helpful. So here you see some different verses from chapter 2. And as Rabbi Isaac said very beautifully, we're going to look at just focus on a few of the different pieces. And one of my approaches is to look at some of the different commentaries, not just what I want to ask, who is the speaker of chapter 1 and 2? Do you mean who is the author of it? Who's the reader of it? And ain't that the question? Right? There is an assumption that this is Solomon at the end of his life. There's also that that's this mysterious Kohelet. And I think there's part of it is let us all kind of read it as the speaker of chapter 1 and 2. That this is just a reflection on humanity and on that fragility of life. So here you see in Ecclesiastes in Kohelet chapter 2, you see this verse. I venture to tempt my flesh with wine and to grasp folly. That goes back to that word Rabbi Isaac said of Havel, while letting my mind direct with wisdom, to the end that I might learn which of the two was better for men to practice in their few days of their life under heaven. And that beauty of the word of life under heaven, again, going back to that fragility, to mortality, to if our days are finite, and this goes back to Adam and Eve, right? Adam and Eve eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and their lives become finite. We become mortal as human beings. What are we going to do with our time that we have here? Especially in the wake of the high holidays. We don't know how much time we have here. May we be written for blessing in the book of life. And here is this incredible question, right? what do we spend our time on? Do we, A, tempt our flesh with wine, and there's all sorts of other language? Do I eat as much as I want? Do I drink as much as I want? I know I've heard that joke about it. There's some joke about a guy who lives into his 80s and 90s, and he eats bran muffins, and he watches his weights and watches his calories and exercise. And he finds out that he's been sitting here making his life and doing these things that he didn't find particularly lovely so he can live a longer and longer life, and he's not sure of the value of it. Okay? So here is, whether it's Solomon, whether it's this Kohelet character, whether it's us, do we just live to our life, to our physical fullest, with as much food and drink and joy and celebration that we could possibly imagine? Or do we take that time to really develop our mind, develop our wisdom, to understand the workings of the universe, to understand the workings of the galaxy? Okay? And he's raising that question of which is better. Now, here is then Rashi's, an answer from Rashi. So this is Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzhak. Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzhak is living in Troyes in France in the 10th century. Okay, so here he is in medieval France. He's also a physician, and so he is one of our top biblical commentators, and he commented here on Ecclesiastes as well. And he says, he's trying to explain what is, when it says to grasp foolishness, right? That to grasp folly, this is going back to that sense of what is hevel? What is this vapor? What is this ephemeral piece that we're trying to gather? And he says, the things that appear foolish to me concerning which I said, because God is with me, and I will be able. For example, the prohibition against wearing shatnez and having a mingled species in the vineyard. So shatnez means that you have a mixed kind of something, that I'm wearing a piece of clothing that is both wool and linen together, that you're not supposed to do, okay? Or that you're not supposed to have multiple kinds of varieties in your vineyard, which Satan and the nations of the world are critical of. So what Rashi is saying is, these are rules that are in Torah, but the other nations are saying, why are you doing these crazy things? Can you explain it to us? Because why would not, what does it matter if you're wearing wool or cotton together, or wool or linen together, or planting multiple species? Um, and, and so it states, it is best to take hold of one regarding Shaul, whose eyes seem to foolishly kill both man and woman, right? There's this whole thing of why does Shaul, of Saul, King Saul, wipe out everyone when actually he could have then rescued some or maintained some of them. And the answer that is often given in Torah is it was the commandment of the omnipresent of God, and he called it foolishness. Okay, so it's as you're reading this, what is Rashi saying? Why are we trying to grasp all of this? Is it worth taking should you just, with the finite time you have, live it up to its fullest? Or should you struggle to try to figure out some of these mitzvot, some of these commandments that don't seem to make any sense? Okay? Do you all like that reading of Rashi? Do you see that connection of what he's saying? Do we try to sort out? I believe Rabbi Isaac said he was were you a philosophy major?
Yes, I was.
Ah, okay. So here you have it. Rabbi Isaacs was a philosophy major. Do we have any other philosophy majors here? I got my degree in sociology, okay? Which you could also say is hevel and folly. But instead of trying to figure out how things are thought about, I wanted to see the dynamics of groups and real people. I wanted something that was concrete to work on, as opposed to ephemeral and out there. Okay, and so that's, you see here in Ecclesiastes, that real challenge and question of what are we going to spend our life and our time on. Okay, the next one. Asiti li gadot. I am a gardener. I will freely admit I love planting gardens. So this one caught my attention. You see a whole list of things that Kohelet says I did, right? That I did this, I built houses. I built, I did this, I did that, I did all of these list of things. One of the things was a garden. And here you see Kohelet Rabbah. Here's a piece of midrash. Okay, what does it mean that I laid out gardens and grove which I planted every kind of fruit tree? So the question again, this is I believe that was married many wives. I built many houses. I planted many gardens. I had lots of horses. I did all of these things. Is it really worthwhile? Is there something powerful and meaningful to doing this? And here you see in Kohelet Rabbah asking a very interesting question. What does it mean to lay out gardens and groves? Okay. And you see here, I made myself gardens and orchards, plain sense, and I planted in them trees of every fruit, even peppers. Do I have anyone here who is a fan of peppers? Do we have anyone that likes spicy stuff and planting all kinds of different stuff? I know that my wife and I look through all kinds of seed catalogs, curious of if we can grow this type of eggplant or this type of pepper because we want to use it in our cooking. Okay, so here is you actually see this in Kohelet Rabbah in the Midrash. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana says Solomon would use the demons. I'm going to presume that means his these spicy seeds, and he would send them to India, and they would bring him not the seeds, sorry, but he would send out his emissaries to go out, and they would go to India, and they would bring him water from there, and he would water the pepper trees, and they would bring it and bear fruit. Okay, so is this that Solomon is going all over the world to try to find, to bring back the resources he needs to grow these pepper trees? Rabbi Yanai, son of Rabbi Shimon, says, if you say so, you're merely exhausting Solomon. Yes, Solomon wasn't going to try to go and find every fruit and every tree and every kind of pepper, but he was out there. Okay? In his wisdom, he ascertained the foundation of the land and determined which foundation was directed there, and he planted it on the foundation of the land so it bore fruit. Okay? Two different paradigms. Is what the Kohelet is saying of expansive experience, is it that I'm going to go far and wide and see how many different experiences I can go? Or am I going to go for depth? And if Solomon is building the foundations for his orchard and for his garden, why is that important? What is he trying to do? He's trying to leave a legacy. If the question is what do I do in my lifetime and what is the point of all of this? Is it that I get to experience all of these things to make the most of my time? Or is it as I'm experiencing what I have in my lifetime, do I want to make sure that I am leaving something behind for the next generation? He is creating a foundation for the next generation. Okay? So I see, Nora, do you have a hand up or are you agreeing you like peppers? There are a lot of people with screens off, so it's hard to know which one that is. Agreeing, you like peppers. No apologies are necessary. Okay, and Maria's actually raising that piece that comes from Shoftim. When you go to war, you don't want to cut down the fruit trees, right? But even in war, you want to actually preserve that moving forward. I'm going to share one last piece that gets into the same theme. I found that wisdom is superior to folly, as light is superior to darkness. A wise man has his eyes in his head, whereas a fool walks in darkness. But I also realized that the same fate awaits them both. Okay? This is both, and Kohelet goes back and forth. You can get whiplash very quickly from Kohelet, because as soon as you feel like, wait a second, I've got the answer to how I'm going to experience this, Kohelet then pulls the rug right out from under you. Is that Sally from the Peanuts? And says, don't worry about it. You thought you were onto real wisdom, but I'm going to shift gears and don't worry because it really doesn't mean anything because we're all mortal, right? He says, I realize the same fate. Oh, I apologize for the gendering there. Kohelet, whoever this speaker is, I realize the same fate awaits them both. So I reflected. The fate of the fool is also destined for me. Then what advantage that I have to be wise? And I came to the conclusion that too was Hevel. So Rabbi Isaacs raised it beautifully. Does that mean it's futile? Does that mean that it's vapor? Does that mean that it's ephemeral? Does that mean that it's a question that I can't quite answer, that I can't quite wrap my head around? I know I just did a whole teaching about immanence and transcendent. Does that mean that the answer to that is I can't quite wrap my mind around it, but I know I've got a feeling, an inclination of what to do? And he says, because the wise man, just like the fool, is not remembered forever, for as the succeeding days rolls by, both are forgotten. The last of the wise dies, just like the fool. And I feel like there's kind of a challenge there. Do you all believe that? Do you agree with that? Do you agree that the wise and the fool, it really just doesn't matter because everyone's going to die anyway, and there is no legacy that you leave behind? I am open for takers. Go ahead, Anne.
I think some people have a proclivity towards the spiritual, and other people, they don't. They think about it a little bit. They might go to a temple or a church, or they might not. But there's just a lot of different people in the world, and some people just think it's foolish to spend all your time thinking about the other side. Let me just put it that way.
So, Anne, it's interesting. So you're even saying maybe it's all, read that instead of futile, that too was spiritual, right? And
Yeah.
that
Yes.
and that for some people, they want to engage in the spiritual, and that's a spiritual pursuit. And some people that they're not going to be able to make a decision. They want to live in this world and not in the world to come. They can't decide what's going to happen to us after our died or what's going to happen in the future. I'm just going to concentrate on this world. Joel, did you have a comment? You got to unmute.
Yes, this whole thing is rather negative and to me flies in the face of Jewish values as I understand them to be. Doesn't matter whether we started out, as Rabbi Gidon talked about, saying all life is futile. Why deal with it? Whether you're a fool or you're not a fool, the same fate awaits. Well, in Judaism, we deal with this world, not the quote unquote next world. And therefore our aim is to make this world better. So the world is not future. There's hope for a better tomorrow. And what we do, what you emphasize, Rabbi, at our temple, beautifully, is that we need to be active. We need to work for a better tomorrow. There always must be hope. This just flies in the face of it. Everything that's written. It's a general statement, but it's just my take on it.
And the big question is this a statement? Is this a question? Is this a challenge? Here we're in Sukkot. You're living in this time where you're understanding the fragility, you're understanding that moment of transition from the summer into the fall. We've just come from high holidays. Is it, this is the way it is, or is it, do you really believe this? Nora, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, the literal reading of the statements are definitive. There's no room when I read a few of the beginning statements. There's no room for error. I don't think it's subject to other interpretations unless we're going to get there as the text moves on.
And that's what you'll have to see. I did just post back again in the chat the full schedule for this week. And I know we have some of our other teachers. Rabbi Joy Danowitz is here. Rabbi Cookie Lee Olsheim is here. Rabbi Barbara Goldman-Wartel. They're going to be teaching later in the week, so we'll see as it unfolds. Tomorrow is Rabbi Vinakor and Rabbi Bahar, and they'll be teaching at noon Eastern on this same Zoom link. Nora, James, I see you have a hand up. Did you want to jump in here?
Yes. So what I'm getting from this, and maybe I'm just showing my age here, because I'm kind of young. It seems like Kohelet is just like, we're all here for a good time, maybe not a long time. And so while it's important to like not cause all sorts of calamity and turmoil, and to do good things, we don't have time really to be like worrying about oh my goodness, I just lost it. Sorry. We don't have time to be worrying about whether these things will have like long lasting effects. Kind of just what effects do they have on the world around us and the people around us?
So remember that Judaism is not typically either or, it's a both and. So remember that Judaism tends to go back and forth. That maybe, and this is the beauty of that Kohelet is the beauty of Kohelet is saying, don't get so wrapped in your ability to learn everything and do everything that you're going to leave some gigantic legacy. Enjoy the world while you're here. That's part of it. And maybe there's another of, if you just do that, you're forgetting you do actually leave a legacy behind. Even if you spend some of your time in a sukkah, you only spend some of your time in a temporary shelter. The people of Israel did wander for 40 years, but then they also settled for how long in the land of Israel. And so, look, part of it is, which side of this do you go on? Do you go on the folly side or do you go on the wisdom side? Or how do you draw yourself back and forth between the two? Okay. So Susan's asks, what is Kohelet? Kohelet is the author of this book. Rashi is Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzhak. He's a rabbinic commentator in the 10th century in France. And he writes a lot. He is one of those biblical commentators. And so what it does is here we have this biblical book of Kohelet that's in the third part. So there's Torah, prophets, and writings. This is in the last bit of the Hebrew Bible. It's a Megillah, a scroll like Esther that we read on Purim and Ruth that we read on Shavuot. Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, is the book we read during Sukkot. And Rashi, like others, are making comments, making commentary to give us some different perspective on it. Rabbi Isaacs, did you want to chime in kind of as we're wrapping up our time?
Yes, a couple of things. I wanted to, what Joel was saying, I think helps kind of clarify my point about what I called intonation, or might be better put as, sort of the classic actor's exercise, where you say one sentence, but depending on how you deliver it, it has all manner of meanings. So Joel, strictly speaking, Kohelet is laying out facts, true. But if we read that, depending on how the emotion behind it, or the way, is it kind of left with, is it said with shrugging shoulders? Is it said with the kind of centered spiritual sort of, these are the facts, but you can tell from the laying out of the facts that his feathers are unruffled. There's a lot of different ways to understand what he is saying, and I did want to make one other point, and you can respond, but one other thing that I was trying to, I didn't get a chance to look at some of my biblical dictionaries around Hevel, but I acknowledge that this needs a little more investigation, but knowing in multiple places that one way to translate hevel is breath. Let's remember our relationship to breath. That what Kohelet is you could actually say it as exactly the opposite of vanity. Like, we need to go into this. We are drawn to it. It is our life breath, right? And just like breath, it's unfortunate that we're so dependent on this chemical that we can't see to live, and that sometimes isn't present. But we do have to engage, or you can spin out the interpretations in there. Either we need it, or we are drawn to it, and that's okay. It's this kind of rumination is sort of our lifeblood, especially as Jews. So that's I want to put that out there as well as we think about hevel, breath as a potential.
Thank you, Rabbi Isaacs.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
it's one of the things I would suggest is if you're joining us for the series, take some time to look up and see what some of those different translations of that are, right? Because suddenly, if you start shifting some of that language and those translations around, I realize the same fate awaits them both. I reflected the fate of the fool is also destined for me. To what advantage have I been wise? And I came to the conclusion that all was breath. What an interesting, all was breath. And we know that we can take a breath and breathe with a lot of ruach, a lot of spirit, or we can just puff out breath and it's just, I'm breathing in and out. I'm just going through the motions. It gets into that beautiful idea of kavanah, of what is our intention that goes with our breath. And breath can be really powerful. You have the whole concept of the butterfly effect, or breath can be just, that's just something that we do, that I'm just a little breath on the wind. Jerry, did you want to chime in? So any last thoughts? I want to share one other text with you. This is one of my favorite readings. I'm hoping that'll clear out. If the bar is in the way, I apologize. This is one of my favorite readings that comes from Siddur Lev Shalom, which is a conservative Siddur that we use twice a month. We do a conservative service. In the beginning, I'm not sure I can hide this. Hide the floating. There we go. Okay. In the beginning, God created the transcendent, infinite, without end heavens, that the heavens we can't quite reach a boundary and hold, that are not, right? Here we're talking about something vapor that we can't touch, and the earth, immanent, finite, and boundary, wants to touch them. In the beginning, God created threads stretching between them, between the heavens that are not and the earth that cries out for help. God created humans made from the clay of the earth. For each person is a prayer. And what is prayer but breath? And a thread touching what has no end. It's transcendent and infinite with a tender and delicate touch. A miracle is when the thread, we vibrate, we feel and react, when a connection between the infinite and transcendent, the finite and immanent are made. A miracle is when we move in such a way that we create the connection between the infinite and transcendent and the finite and infinite. And I share that with you because that to me is part of Kohelet, that you see these moments where he has these moments where the writer, Kohelet, has those moments of connection when it all clicks, and then he loses that connection. He has those moments, and I'm looking out the weather here. One moment it's beautiful and bright and sunny, and then the next minute it's pouring rain. And it's so incredible because I look in pouring rain and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go outside in that. But what happens if it doesn't rain? Then there is no trees, there is no fruit, there are no vegetables, there is no life. And so as wonderful and beautiful as it is when it's sunny, if I don't have rain, then I'm not able to survive. And if I don't have sunshine, I'm not able to survive. It's easy to see that going back and forth. I hope, going to figure out how to, there we go, stop the share. We are now at 1 o'clock Eastern time. As we gather here, and I just, as we're talking about Kohelet and we're talking about futility and vanity and wind, how amazing it is that we're here in a virtual space. We are gathered in the internet, right? Which is not a solid space, and yet here we are getting a chance to talk together and learn together and study together. That Rabbi Isaacs was here 1 minute, and then he was gone the next. And then we were able to bring him back. Is this all just vanity? Is this all just wind? Is this all just something? Or is there a real opportunity for discourse and learning and study together? Here we're having an experience of Kohelet and Ecclesiastes and a little bit of Hevel. And a big thank you to my colleague and friend, and realize that Rabbi Isaacs and I have never met in person. He might be 6 foot tall for all I know. As he shakes his head. But how amazing we've become friends because of Zoom and the ability to do Chavruta together. And I hope that you will continue to join us. I will drop, I'm hoping one more time. Let's see if this is going to work. I am putting into the chat, I am putting once again the list of all of the classes. The Zoom link you used today is the Zoom link for all of the sessions and all of the classes. There will be Monday through, again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And a different pair of us, rabbis from small congregations, will give you a chance. And then you can think of the questions that you want to ask Rabbi Isaacs and I. And don't worry, it'll be 2 other rabbis tomorrow that you'll be able to ask those challenging questions to. And we are working on a program for Hanukkah and for continuing forward. There is one. What we will do, Susan, is be able to take what we are preparing and sharing today and be able to share that with everybody who is registered for class. We will do that, and there will also be a link to a YouTube playlist, so you will be able to go and watch, review all of these, or share them with family and friends if you want to say, see, there was something wise, or you could even say, look, there's something that was pure rabbinic vanity that was shared with you. Any other last